Chapter 8 of Quicksand. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Elizabeth Klett. Quicksand by Nella Larsen. Chapter 8. A year thick with various adventures had sped by since that spring day on which Helga Crane had set out away from Chicago's indifferent unkindness for New York in the company of Mrs. Hayes Rohr. New York she had found not so unkind, not so unfriendly, not so indifferent. There she had been happy, and secured work, had made acquaintances and another friend. Again she had had that strange transforming experience, this time not so fleetingly, that magic sense of having come home. Harlem, teeming black Harlem, had welcomed her and lulled her into something that was, she was certain, peace and contentment. The request and recommendation of Mrs. Hayes Rohr had been sufficient for her to obtain work with the insurance company in which that energetic woman was interested. And through Anne it had been possible for her to meet and to know people with tastes and ideas similar to her own. Their sophisticated, cynical talk, their elaborate parties, the unobtrusive correctness of their clothes and homes, all appealed to her craving for smartness, for enjoyment. Soon she was able to reflect with a flicker of amusement on that constant feeling of humiliation and inferiority which had encompassed her in Naxos. Her New York friends looked with contempt and scorn on Naxos and all its works. This gave Helga a pleasant sense of avengement. Any shreds of self-consciousness or apprehension which at first she may have felt vanished quickly, escaped in the keenness of her joy at seeming at last to belong somewhere. For she considered that she had, as she put it, found herself. Between Anne Grey and Helga Crane there had sprung one of those immediate and peculiarly sympathetic friendships. Uneasy at first, Helga had been relieved that Anne had never returned to the uncomfortable subject of her mother's death, so intentionally mentioned on their first meeting by Mrs. Hayes Rohr, beyond a tremulous brief, "You won't talk to me about it, will you? I can't bear the thought of death. Nobody ever talks to me about it. My husband, you know." This Helga discovered to be true. Later, when she knew Anne better, she suspected that it was a bit of a pose assumed for the purpose of doing away with the necessity of speaking regretfully of a husband who had been perhaps not too greatly loved. After the first pleasant weeks, feeling that her obligation to Anne was already too great, Helga began to look about for a permanent place to live. It was, she found, difficult. She eschewed the why as too bare, impersonal, and restrictive. Nor did furnished rooms or the idea of a solitary or shared apartment appeal to her. So she rejoiced when one day Anne, looking up from her book, said lightly, "Helga, since you're going to be in New York, why don't you stay here with me? I don't usually take people, it's too disrupting. Still, it is sort of pleasant having somebody in the house, and I don't seem to mind you. You don't bore me or bother me. If you'd like to stay, think it over." Helga didn't, of course, require to think it over, because lodgment in Anne's home was in complete accord with what she designated as her aesthetic sense. Even Helga Crane approved of Anne's house, and the furnishings which so admirably graced the big cream-coloured rooms. Beds with long tapering posts to which tremendous age lent dignity and interest, bonneted old highboys, tables that might be Duncan Fife, rare spindle-legged chairs, and others whose ladder backs gracefully climbed the delicate wall-panels. These historic things mingled harmoniously and comfortably with brass-bound Chinese tea-sets, luxurious deep chairs and davenports, tiny tables of gay colour, a lacquered jade-green settee with gleaming black satin cushions, lustrous Eastern rugs, ancient copper, Japanese prints, some fine etchings, a profusion of precious bric-a-brac, and endless shelves filled with books. Anne Grey herself was, as Helga expressed it, almost too good to be true. 30 maybe, brownly beautiful, she had the face of a golden Madonna, grave and calm and sweet, with shining black hair and eyes. She carried herself as queens are reputed to bear themselves and probably do not. Her manners were as agreeably gentle as her own soft name. She possessed an impeccably fastidious taste in clothes, knowing what suited her and wearing it with an air of unconscious assurance. The unusual thing, a native New Yorker, she was also a person of distinction, financially independent, well-connected, and much sought after. And she was interesting, an odd confusion of wit and intense earnestness, a vivid and remarkable person. Yes, undoubtedly Anne was almost too good to be true. She was almost perfect. Thus established, secure, comfortable, Helga soon became thoroughly absorbed in the distracting interests of life in New York. Her secretarial work with the Negro Insurance Company filled her day. Books, the theatre, parties, used up the nights. Gradually, in the charm of this new and delightful pattern of her life, she lost that tantalizing oppression of loneliness and isolation, which always, it seemed, had been a part of her existence. But while the continuously gorgeous panorama of Harlem fascinated her, thrilled her, the sober mad rush of white New York failed entirely to stir her. Like thousands of other Harlem dwellers, she patronized its shops, its theatres, its art galleries, and its restaurants, and read its papers, without considering herself a part of the monster. And she was satisfied, unenvious. For her this Harlem was enough. Of that white world, so distant, so near, she asked only indifference. No, not at all did she crave, from those pale and powerful people, awareness. Sinister folk, she considered them, who had stolen her birthright. Their past contribution to her life, which had been but shame and grief, she had hidden away from brown folk in a locked closet, never, she told herself, to be reopened. Some day she intended to marry one of those alluring brown or yellow men who danced attendance on her. Already financially successful, any one of them could give to her the things which she had now come to desire: a home like Anne's, cars of expensive makes such as lined the avenue, clothes and furs from Bendel's and Révillon Frères, servants and leisure. Always her forehead wrinkled in distaste whenever involuntarily, which was somehow frequently, her mind turned on the speculative grey eyes and visionary uplifting plans of Dr. Anderson. That other, James Vale, had slipped absolutely from her consciousness. Of him she never thought. Helga Crane meant now to have a home, and perhaps laughing, appealing, dark-eyed children in Harlem. Her existence was bounded by Central Park, Fifth Avenue, St. Nicholas Park, and 145th Street. Not at all a narrow life, as Negroes live it, as Helga Crane knew it. Everything was there, vice and goodness, sadness and gaiety, ignorance and wisdom, ugliness and beauty, poverty and riches. And it seemed to her that somehow of goodness, gaiety, wisdom, and beauty always there was a little more than of vice, sadness, ignorance, and ugliness. It was only riches that did not quite transcend poverty. "But," said Helga Crane, "what of that? Money isn't everything. It isn't even the half of everything. And here we have so much else, and by ourselves. It's only outside of Harlem, among those others, that money really counts for everything." In the actuality of the pleasant present and the delightful vision of an agreeable future, she was contented and happy. She did not analyze this contentment, this happiness, but vaguely, without putting it into words, or even so tangible a thing as a thought, she knew it sprang from a sense of freedom, a release from the feeling of smallness which had hedged her in, first during her sorry, unchildlike childhood among hostile white folk in Chicago, and later during her uncomfortable sojourn among snobbish black folk in Naxos. End of Chapter 8.